Hello and welcome to Dokupied, a podcast about anime, manga, light novels, and industry news. Once again, there's actually a ton of stuff to cover this week, so I'm going to jump right into the news. Here's a couple updates on the various delays due to the ongoing global pandemic. One that hits a bit close to home is my home convention, Otakon, held in DC every year, has been canceled this year. Pretty expectedly, really not a surprise. Most other summer anime conventions have been called at this point, or will be called soon, anything around that range. So Otakon being next to go was expected. I mostly go every year. Personally, it really depends on what kind of industry guests and screenings and things like that they get, but it's usually worth going. They get a fair amount of good guests and screenings each year. So this is quite disappointing for me personally, being unable to go this summer. Next, this news is more likely to impact anyone who buys stuff from Japan or is expecting stuff. The Japan Post suspended EMS packages to the US. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's the most kind of common method for sending media, books, Blu-rays, etc. from Japan and getting it shipped here, even probably figs and stuff like that. So this should really have a pretty significant impact on delivery times or estimates for anything you've ordered from Japan. And I assume this is going to equally impact forwarding services and other similar things. So just expect delays or outright cancellations maybe. Some more anime series have been delayed. The Promised Neverland Season 2 was delayed to January 2021, so that got kicked back a whole long way. The Irregular at Magic High School Season 2 was delayed to October, and that one's hurting. There's been quite a few series that I was really looking forward to that have been delayed, and this one's been something I've been waiting for a while. So having this pushed back even further we've already waited this long, so it's fine, but that sucks. October isn't that bad, but at the end of the day, we've already waited this long, and the health and safety of all the staff are paramount here, so no real use complaining. Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise Season 2 has been delayed. Another film, Nakitai Watashi wa Neko o Kaburu, was delayed. This is coming from Studio Colorido. I'm not sure how you'd say that, Colorido, who animated Penguin Highway, a fantastic film. The original novel of which it's adapted from was written by Tomihiko Morimi, one of my favorite novel authors ever. While that's not necessarily related to this new film, Maria Okada, also a fantastic writer, is handling the script for this film. Something to look forward to when it comes back from being delayed, or when it eventually gets into theater, and hopefully we get a screening in the US when screenings become a thing again. We did get an update on one previously delayed anime series. The Millionaire Detective will restart in July. So that is pushed back to summer, basically. Is that summer? Yeah, it's basically summer. So it's being kicked back essentially the whole season. And I'm assuming a lot of this has more to do with the voice acting and being able to record lines rather than the actual animation portion of this, because generally the VO is the last thing that's done for a series. A lot of these things being pushed out are likely due to that. But obviously also, if their schedule is quite tight, it could entirely be because of animation as well. It's hard to say for some of these. Some of them it's clear which one it is, some of them less clear. The new Yokai Watch series was delayed. Black Clover is now delayed. Kingdom Season 3 also delayed. And Major Second, the second season, also delayed. Lots of things just being hit. expectedly. And again, I expect more to continue to be hit as things continue, especially as this whole thing continues on. As it goes on for more months at a time, more and more series will be pushed back that were meant to air in summer will probably be pushed back to fall or maybe even beyond. We're going to jump right out of all that sad delay news and do some licensing news. Let's start off with Seven Seas recently announced a absolute fuck ton of new manga and light novel licenses, and some of these I'm really excited for. Some of them I'm sure others will be really excited for, and some of them I have no idea what to think of them. I'm a fan of giving things a good chance, even if they're not necessarily my cup of tea. I am open to pretty much anything. Anyway, enough about me. This is news. So they've licensed, I'll just go down the list. They had a long thread on Twitter, and I'm just going to go in the order they announced them in, but you can always check out their website for more information on each specific title. There's The Sorcerer King of Destruction and The Golem of the Barbarian Queen, manga and light novel series. They got them both. I'm in Love with the Villainess. It's a Yuri light novel series. How Many Light Years to Babylon, manga series. Manly Appetites, Minigishi Loves Otsu, Boys Love manga series. Roll Over and Die, I Will Fight for an Ordinary Life with My Love and Cursed Sword, manga series. Days of Love at Seagull Villa, a Yuri manga series. I don't know why they always make sure to specify that it's a Yuri manga and not just manga, but guess that's marketing for you. Kageki Shoujo, The Curtain Rises, manga omnibus. Trapped in a Dating Sim, The World of Otome Games is Tough for Mobs, light novel series. Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life, Everyday Misadventures, manga series. The Saint's Magic Power is Omnipotent, manga and light novel series. Tamano-chan's A Fox, manga series. The Kingdoms of Ruin, manga series. My Alcoholic Escape from Reality, manga by Nagata Copy. And Even Though We're Adults by Takako Shimura. Personally, I know I said I'm going to keep my own personal stuff out, but here we go. It's my podcast. I talk about what I want. Of those, I'm pretty excited for 4 of them. And then the rest, I'll see how they go. But How Many Light Years to Babylon is by Domon Seimon, who wrote the Voynich Hotel, which is a great short manga series. I think it's 3 volumes. And just wonderful, funny, dark, and really unique art style. This author is good and worth following, and so How Many Light Years to Babylon is another Domon series, and I'm really looking forward to it. The more we get of this author in English, the better. The Didn't I Say to Make My Abilities Average in the Next Life, Everyday Misadventures manga series is another one I'm looking forward to. I really love the light novel series, or rather, I like pretty much everything Funa writes. Funa, the original author, is lighthearted, funny. The stories are quick and breezily written. It's always a pleasure to read those light novels. And while this is a manga series, it's just side story stuff for a series I already like. So that's really not a hard sell for me. And then there's My Alcoholic Escape from Reality by Nagata Kabi. And as you could probably tell by the title and author, this author wrote several really popular, quite self-reflective, semi-autobiographies, I think they are, that hit way too close to home for a lot of, my fellow anime manga fans. And so this is another one. And if you at all liked any of her other works, definitely check this one out too. And then the last one they announced, which was Even Though We're Adults by Takako Shimura. This is one I'm really, really excited for. Wandering Sun and Sweet Blue Flowers are fantastic manga series. I love them both. I own them both. The Wandering Sun anime I thought was really great too. That's actually what got me into Takako Shimura in the first place. And I'm really excited that we're getting more, finally. So, this is good news. So that's it for the Seven Seas licensing bonanza. Basically, they had so many series. It's kind of nuts. But there were other companies that licensed and announced new licenses. Cross Infinite World, which a publisher I'm not super familiar with. They're pretty new, and I really don't know what else they publish, actually. I'd have to look that up. But they licensed Hello, I'm a Witch and My Crush Wants Me to Make a Love Potion. They're releasing them digitally starting on June 30th. It's a light novel series. Another long title, not one I've heard of personally. Maybe there's fans of this series already out there. If you like it, let me know. I really don't know anything about it, actually. Got a couple updates for the Netflix licensed anime series. Torohedoro is finally being streamed outside of Japan starting on May 28th. God, I hate when they do this. Every season they steal some good show I was really looking forward to watching, every week as it came out, and they push it back 3 months till after the whole show ends. So I'm expecting to be able to watch it every week, hoping, I'll have 3 months of really cool, great show once a week that I get to look forward to. But no, I have to wait at least 6 months for them to drop it all at once, and then it goes on my backlog of series, and I have to get around to it rather than just watching 30 minutes a week. God, I hate when they license anime that originally air or were airing on Japanese TV weekly. I really, really, really wish they would just stick to making original series, things that don't go on TV, that never get released weekly, that we never have to sit and twiddle our thumbs and wait for, that they produce from their own budget and time frame. That's what I want from them, not licensed series. It's absolute bullshit. Anyway, they'll also be streaming the new Pokemon Journeys TV series outside of Japan in June, and I think they also mentioned they'll be streaming One Piece with an English dub. They're picking up a bunch of stuff, as usual, in somewhat similar and probably not super welcome news for people. One Punch Man is getting a Hollywood live-action film. Now, I don't know if that means they're ever going to actually make it, but they've announced it, and just like all the other manga or anime Hollywood adaptations that either never happen, fizzle out, or do happen and are absolutely fucking awful, we'll see where this one falls. I have no thoughts. One Punch Man's great, but I really, 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 really don't see how Hollywood's going to do a movie that makes any sense for One Punch Man. I don't know. I'm not creative enough for that, and I don't think they are either. I guess we're just gonna keep nosediving on some sad news, but The Devil is a Part-Timer light novel series will be ending in its 21st volume this summer. The series got an anime a number of years back that was quite fun and really funny, really enjoyable to watch, that weirdly enough never got additional seasons, so I started buying and reading the light novels. Sad to see that it's ending, but all good things must come to an end. One more light novel series that announced its final volume is Overlord, and that'll be ending with the 17th volume. I think fans have known for a long time that it was heading towards its ending. This is not a surprise for most fans, especially if you follow or know anything about the author. This is pretty expected. I'm surprised it made it as far as 17 volumes, basically, but the anime is very popular, and hopefully that means they'll continue to adapt the light novel to the end, especially now that it's going to be officially over, maybe with a little bit more time in the production schedule so we don't have quite as, let's say, memorable CG as the most recent season had. But I'd love for them to finish adapting the story in anime form. Final bit of news for this episode or week is Akiko Higashimura is launching a new manga series starting on April 29th called Watashi no koto o oboite masu ka? It's a manga series obviously. And I personally really love Akiko Higashimura's manga. I own everything they've published in English so far. She's got Princess Jellyfish, Tokyo, Todorebo Girls, and Blank Canvas, My So-Called Artist's Journey, are the 3 series that she has published in English so far. So hopefully this new series does well, and we'll get it in English eventually. Once again, a lot more news than I thought there'd be between weekly episodes, but that wraps up the news for this week. Before I jump into my recommendations section, here's your general spoiler warning. As usual, I do not spoil any major plot points, but I will be talking about overall plot development and characters and my opinions on the series. So here is your light spoiler warning. The first series I'm going to talk about for this episode is a light novel. It's gotten quite popular as of late. It's called My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom by Satoru Yamaguchi. And this is published by J Novel Club in digital and now print. They have 5 volumes out as of today. The 5th volume just released on April 27th. I've read the first 4, and I'm waiting for the weekend to dig in on the 5th. I know I'll knock it out, within a couple hours. They're fun, easy reads. I've been wanting to talk about this series for a little while, actually, especially now that the anime is currently airing, because the anime is really, really well done. It is a great adaptation of the story, and I absolutely recommend everyone go watch it. It's hilarious. But the light novel actually has quite a bit to offer that the anime has to adapt and cut out and change. And so I wanted to talk about the light novel separate from the anime, because I think there's actually quite a bit of value there for fans of the series. I usually think that there is a lot of value in reading light novels that you like the anime for anyway, especially if the series is ongoing and has more story. But this series in particular, I think, has quite a few things that are worth reading in addition to watching, because there are only 5 volumes out in English so far, and I have yet to read the 5th one. I mean, it just came out like 2 days ago. I know, I really should have read it by now. But hey, forgive me. I was waiting for the weekend so I could read it without any distractions. So I'm only going to talk about, in general, what I've read from the first 4 English volumes out so far. Now, if you haven't watched the anime series, and I don't expect that you necessarily will have, a brief overview of what this story is about is that Katarina, our main character, dies and is reincarnated in the world of an otome game. So this is, yes, an isekai. Unsurprisingly, it has a lot of kind of standard isekai tropes, but this series is very unlike pretty much all other isekai in one really basic way that spins off into turning it into something completely different. The main character is a female. Yeah, exactly. The main character is a girl who reincarnates as Katarina, and that's kind of what causes everything to be really different. The other part is that she reincarnates into the world of an otome game, which, for those of you who don't know what otome games are, I'm not sure you'd be listening to a podcast this niche in the first place if you don't, but maybe it's not your genre of choice. It's the opposite of like a regular dating sim. So instead of male main character romancing a bunch of potential female characters, in this case, it's the opposite. So a woman is romancing a bunch of potential guy characters. Well, they're not potential guy characters. The woman is potentially romancing a number of guy characters. Jeez. Anyway, it's a dating sim aimed primarily at women instead of men. That's the only difference. Now, the gimmick of this series is that the character reincarnates as the main villain, or villainess, as the title says. So she does not reincarnate as a hero or as the main character. She does not reincarnate as a random character. She's not in a world she doesn't know. This is the world of the game that she knows and has played. She actually was playing it and cleared one of the routes the night before she died. And so that all ties in. All of this is kind of the main gimmick, but what really makes this series shine and what makes it special in comparison to, both other isekai series and series that have other female leads is that the main character, Katarina, is incredibly sympathetic and very human. She is well fleshed out. She's an absolute idiot, and it's wonderful. Her nickname is Bakurina by fans. Personally, I can't help but call this series Bakurina and think of her as Bakurina every time the name Katarina comes up in the text. They're synonymous at this point. She is denser than the densest black hole in the universe, and it's wonderful. Now, this gimmick doesn't last forever, and I actually think they do a really good job of tackling the gimmick of how dense she is. So to kind of back up a step, it is, because it's an otome game, it is a romantic comedy, and with the main female lead, the gimmick is that she is the villain, or the villainess. In the world she reincarnates in, she is actually a child still. So she reincarnates a number of years earlier than the game is set. A lot of the first volume is all about her attempts to mitigate what she perceives as the oncoming bad ends. So all routes lead to doom. In the original game, Katarina's character, pretty much in any route, is either exiled or killed, and just generally is an absolute horrible person that no one likes. Now, that is not our main character, and that is not our new Katarina, and so she starts off as a child. When she's younger, she meets all of the characters from the game except for the protagonist, and this will come into play later, but she meets basically all of the potential romance routes except for the secret route. There's always a secret character, there's always a secret route, and I won't spoil anything at all about that. So anyway, she meets all the characters, and essentially as the first volume rolls on, it becomes clear to the reader, us, that this is not going to go at all like the game. To Katarina, it doesn't seem to dawn on her that all these things that she's done, simply by being a different person than the original Katarina, has changed the story of the game to where it's mostly irrelevant to how things will actually play out for her. And that's what makes a lot of the humor work. She's really dense and just doesn't see those things. She's an idiot. And it's great, like I keep saying. It's really funny to watch her completely miss the point and to watch all the characters around her absolutely get the point. It's great. Speaking of kind of the other characters around her, one really fascinating thing that there's, I don't think, a great way for the anime to do this at all, or at least not in the way the novels do it, is that each chapter, or I think it's every chapter, but most of the chapters offer an alternate point of view character for events that happened. So Katarina is our main narrator and is who we mainly follow as a POV character. We also get POVs of certain either important or otherwise significant moments in the story from the POV of the other character that was involved in it. So an example being that Katarina tells her side of it, and you read it from her perspective, and you can kind of imagine what the other character might be thinking based on their responses or how she describes their response. The author then goes back, writes it from the point of view of the other character, and gives you additional insight into how that character's thinking that you completely miss as Katarina, because she is, like I said, denser than the densest black hole in the universe and a complete idiot. I mean that endearingly. She is not meant to be this super strong, super smart character. She's really kind. She's human and empathetic and cares about people. And that's her superpower, I guess. And that's what causes all these characters to be drawn to her. And I think it's really well done because in the world of this game, or they're all nobles and otherwise high up in their society. She is just a down-to-earth, real, kind, empathetic person who really does care about them and sees them for who they are. And that's not something any of the main characters have experienced in their lives, essentially. And so it's really easy to see why, A, they all end up liking her so much and caring about her, and B, why it's important that we get these alternate POV for various scenes. The author struggles a little bit with distinguishing character voice. It's a really common trait of light novels, and I don't hold it against the series at all. And there are some characters that are a bit more obviously different, which is nice. So it's not as bad as some of the other light novels where you're just like, wait, who is actually narrating this? I have no idea. In this case, you can kind of tell. So it's definitely a step up there. But these alt POVs are things you're not going to get in the anime. And I think it adds a ton of insight into how these characters that surround Katarina think about her, how they perceive her and what she does. That adds a really great layer to the story and their relationships as things develop. Some of you might think that's a bit repetitive, that we're constantly getting the same scene from another character, but it's usually kept a lot shorter. They don't go entirely line by line and redo the whole thing. They just add the additional narration or thoughts of the character, how they view what Katarina's doing. For me, it's not a complete retread because you're learning a lot more stuff. I can see how someone might interpret it as, hey, I just read this. They're not wrong, but I also think, like I said, it adds additional context in character development. One interesting fact about this series was that the author, and this is in the afterword of Volume 2, never intended for this series to go beyond that. Because of the obvious popularity, it decided to extend it. That kind of shows in the story in Volume 3. You can kind of tell, especially given that Volumes 2, 3, and 4 all are driven by essentially the same plot development, just in different ways and in different characters, but each one kind of the same thing happens, which is interesting. It doesn't really bother me necessarily. I don't think that's a negative. And I think what they do in volumes 3 and 4 to establish the ways that the story will continue and push forward beyond the original premise of this being purely the story of the Otome game, it's definitely necessary to set up a bunch more stuff. And I think they do a good job of that. And by volume 4, I feel like the series has established a lot of really cool stuff that's going to be interesting. And I'm really excited to keep reading. Volume 5 seems to be a bunch of short stories about, various characters set in different kind of times for Katarina. So I guess she's younger. They go back in time for a couple of the stories. I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, I'm going to read it this weekend. The point being, it's mostly short stories, where I do know Volume 6, which is currently being published or simul-published on J-Novel Club, will be focusing on what they are dubbing the sequel to the original Otome game, Fortune Lovers. So, Fortune Lovers 2. And now Katarina has to navigate the sequel. Now, I don't really personally know anything and know what that means and know what that's going to entail, but I'm really excited for how that's going to play out. Obviously, that's Volume 6, so we'll get there. Anyway, the story for the first Otome game, Fortune Lovers, actually ends in the first 2 volumes. So like I said, volumes 3 and 4 take that and expand on the world and kind of set up a base that the author can build on going forward from there. Volumes 1 and 2, sort of if you read them, they are more or less complete stories, and you could kind of think of them that way. And I'm sure the anime is probably going to do that, where the first 2 volumes are going to be the entirety of the first season, and that's totally fine. And I think that'd be a good play for the anime, where they'll end at Volume 2 and maybe tease more, because if it's as popular as, it seems, probably get additional seasons, which I'd love, but you could probably pretend like it ended. Not that I would, obviously, I've read more, but Anyway, to kind of wrap up this recommendation, the story is funny. The characters feel like they have actual growth and go from being Ultima game archetypes to actual people with proper motivations and things outside of the boundaries of the original game that they're all tied to. And I think that's one of the larger draws to this as a series, is that, the characters are all well written and funny, and the setup is hilarious. The writing is breezy. It's an easy read. You can get through volumes really fast. They're not super long either. They are called light novels for a reason. Definitely don't sleep on this series. Head over to J-Novel Club and grab the volumes there. They have additional short stories as some of the bonuses for the premium volumes. So I highly recommend, if you're going to buy the volumes, buy them directly, buy the premium versions, because you can get those short stories. I'm a sucker for short stories, so anytime they have novels and the premium version has additional short stories, well, I'm going to buy it because I want to read them. And one final reassurance for anyone who thinks the gimmick of the story may get old. Like I said, the kind of original premise of it actually ends at the second volume. There's a lot of developments that happen, especially into the third and fourth volumes. Katarina, being a dense Baccarina, might not continue forever, especially not in certain ways. Not going to get too deep into it, but just know that this is not a one-trick pony, and you can know that this series does evolve. Moving on to my next recommendation, it is a manga series this time. I don't want to always talk about only light novels. I've been reading a ton of light novels, and so there's so many I want to talk about that I keep wanting to do 2 light novels every episode. But I also read a lot of really great manga. This is not one that I've read recently, and I'll explain why. It's something that left a strong impression on me, and I've been wanting to talk about it for a while, and that is Girl's Last Tour by Tsukumizu. You might recognize this because it got an anime adaptation a couple years ago. Is it a couple years now? Jeez, time just melts. The anime series is wonderful. The soundtrack is great. Completely worth checking out. Go watch it. Highly recommend it. However, the manga, separate from the anime, is absolutely worth reading. That's not just because I'm biased towards manga. It's because, well, there's a couple reasons. For one, the anime series, while wonderful and a strong, good adaptation of the manga, leaves out some things out of necessity because it is an adaptation. And so I think reading the manga, you get to enjoy the art, the paneling, the flow of the actual manga series rather than, the animation. So you're missing out on the voices and the music and the animation, but you get to enjoy the static artwork. And it's just a new way to enjoy a story that, hopefully you already did like. Another big reason is that the anime series actually only adapts the first 4 of 6 volumes. This manga series is completely finished at 6 volumes. The anime tells the story up to volume 4. Now, if you've seen it, you'll know that that is a pretty satisfying kind of conclusion and end in itself. And if you watched the anime and didn't feel like you needed more, I'd say you're wrong. But I also get where you're coming from. However, there are 2 more volumes worth of stories. And I think the manga ending, and especially those last 2 volumes, have a lot of really powerful stories that are absolutely worth reading. It's something you really don't want to miss. Let me back up a couple steps and tell you about this story before I sell you on the ending. Girl's Last Tour is this slow, quiet, melancholic, overall kind of sad, but really funny and at times inspiring and upbeat story about 2 girls, Chito and Yuri, who, by the name of the title, they're not necessarily the last, but they are, for most of the story, the only 2 characters in it. This is set in kind of a post-war end of the world type of story where humans have like built robots and built this big like city, like multi-layered cities that cover kind of all of the earth, and the earth itself is dying off and losing its natural resources. It's a whole thing. But the point being, it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic survival story where these two girls just chug along doing their everyday thing. They just try and get by and live, and they do meet people, a couple characters throughout the story, and they usually last for a couple of chapters before they kind of part ways and they both go about their lives, or the remainder of their lives. There's always this tint of sadness to the story. The world is in decay, it's in absolute rubble. It's obviously in this like post-war, post-apocalyptic, like depressing, melancholic setting. But the main girls, Shito and Yuri, are really funny, really endearing. The relationship between them is incredibly well written and developed. You really feel for them that they're just living their life, doing their thing, trying to get by, go up the levels of the city to get to the top. That's kind of all that the goal that they have is. The main thrust of the story is them just going on up. For anyone who's into that kind of melancholic, post-apocalyptic, slice-of-life, slow story, this is absolutely one of the best. The artwork is quite unique. I think it's really good, and there's a lot of really fascinating things that Tsukumizu does with the artwork, but it can be a little jarring for people more used to more standard, clean art styles. This is definitely something that I think you can learn to appreciate. I like it a lot, and I think there's a lot of really funny things, especially with the girls' expressions that the author does, or artist, rather. It's the same person. Things that a more standard, clean style wouldn't get across. The way the faces kind of melt or like stretch and pull. I think it really draws out the best of the story and characters. At times, the artwork is also really beautiful. There are a number of gorgeously drawn scenes, especially on this like weird multi-layered empty world where the girls are traversing, and there's a lot of really great visuals. And there's not even always a lot of dialogue. Sometimes the story is told mostly through just art and paneling, or expressions, or just the characters doing things. They don't always have to talk, which I find really great. Not all the chapters have a ton of dialogue. Some of them, have quite a bit of talk between them, but I really love that they don't have to convey the story and to convey the emotion. And I think that's a real asset that this type of art has. So kind of jumping back, now that I've told you a little bit about the setting and the characters for the story, the final 2 volumes aren't at all told in the anime, and I think have a really strong, sad, kind of depressing, melancholic ending, but strong. It's really well done, and I'm a really big fan of stories telling what they want to do and then finishing. I don't like things lingering on more than they have to, and at 6 volumes, this is the perfect length to pick up and run through, either, in a day if you're really into it, or over the course of a week or whatever, grab a volume a day and just sit down and really enjoy this series. I think there's a lot to be said for shorter, tighter written series that have good, strong ends. Having that end in a satisfying way isn't that common. However, I do think these shorter series that are told on their terms, that end on their terms, tend to do really well in that respect. And Girls Last Tour is absolutely one of them. This series alone has made me a big fan of Tsukumizu, and I follow them on Twitter and retweet their art all the time. It's wonderful and zany and surreal, a lot of it, but I really like seeing their artwork, and I believe they launched a new series. I'd have to look into it, but obviously it's not licensed yet, so it's not available in English. Hopefully we'll get it one day. I'm a big fan of this author, and Girls Last Tour has quickly become one of my favorite manga series. There's really, for me personally, nothing to dislike here. It is everything I want in a manga. It has unique, expressive artwork and art style. It has compelling and interesting characters that feel like real people with a strong relationship between them that's really well written. The story is really tight, controlled. It's not fast-paced or anything like that, don't get me wrong. It completely takes its time to get where it's going, and it's absolutely worth it. And it's still only 6 volumes. So there's really, for me, nothing bad I could even say about this. I understand that the genre might not be up some other people's alleys. The slow pace might not be something you would be interested in. You know, to each their own, everyone has their preferences. But for me personally, this struck me out, basically. I absolutely love the anime series, and I like the manga even more. Mostly because it has 2 additional volumes worth of story, and I think a slightly more satisfying conclusion than the anime does, but also just because I think personally I'm a big fan of manga as a medium, and so maybe I'm a little biased on that front. But I do have the Girls Last Tour soundtrack, and I really enjoy listening to that. There's some really great songs on there. Anyway, I kind of was mixing up my recommendation there. This is a manga recommendation, not the anime. As an aside, definitely watch the anime too. So just to wrap up, my recommendations for this week are My Next Life as Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom by Satoru Yamaguchi, published by J Novel Club in English. And my manga recommendation was Girls Last Tour by Tsukumizu, published in English by Yan Press. And that's a wrap on this episode. Thanks for listening. Follow my Twitter, I am DocPay, for updates. Feel free to subscribe and listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Please leave a review if you like the show, and I'll catch you next time.